Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Runners Roundtable, where this season is all about celebrating the women who are changing the landscape of running, changing our perception of running, our discussions around running. And it's just been such a great season. And today I am joined by Lindsay Walter. And fun story is that I didn't follow you up until on one day Amanda Katz and Kate Catchman both reposted your London post. You had this post about running the London Marathon. And I'm like, who is this person? And as soon as I saw your profile, I sent you a message and I'm like, please let me know if I can email you about being on the podcast. So shout out to Amanda and Kate for being two incredible women that are constantly inviting us in to change how we see running and how we see how we show up to running. So just wanted to shout them out because they're the ones that directed my gaze to you. And then just thank you for being on the podcast. I'm going to start off with just asking you to introduce yourself to us and tell us a little bit about how you got into running.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Super honored and excited to be here. My name is Lindsay Walter. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm originally from Wisconsin. I actually played basketball in college and did not take up marathon running until my senior year. I saw it as like just a bucket list kind of fun thing to do, and I thought I'd be just like one and done. But I very did not kind of think that it would kind of snowball into everything that it has. And it has been just incredible, from the amount of marathons I've gotten to run into ultras, 100 milers, all of that. I just think running has been so incredible. Just, from coming from, team sports where, is great. You learn a lot, just, having teammates and all that. But my favorite thing about running is just how empowering it is. And like, you're the one doing the work. And that is something that I have just come to love so much. And it really helps me to accept and embrace my alopecia and bald head. And I'm just so grateful for it. Yeah, I guess that's like pretty much me.
Yeah, I love how you went from basketball to most recently, so people kind of know where we are in time when this podcast was recorded. You went from basketball to running a 24-hour race this past weekend. Like, most people, or not most people, but right, like some people will run a marathon and be like, I'm good, I'm done, don't want to do that again. Some people will run a marathon and will say, I totally want to do that again. And then some people will run a marathon and be like, I don't know how I feel about that. I don't understand. So, I guess, did you go from basketball into marathon training, or did you do like 5Ks, 10Ks, half marathons? What was that transition like for you?
Um, yeah, so I actually jumped into the full. I had never done like a 5K or 10K or anything. I guess like we ran the 2 mile, was a part of like basketball that we did in preseason. And we had postseason after basketball, so we weren't even allowed to do any kind of distance or extra training till that was done with. So I had about a month and a half to train for Grandma's marathon, and train is like a very loose word. Because I didn't have like a running watch. I didn't really know how to gauge like how far I was running. I had really no concept of like how long a mile was. I went on a few like longer runs, and that kind of was my training. Again, I just thought I would be like one and done, and like that would be it. I learned the hard way. I didn't drink any water during that marathon or anything like that. Basically I did everything you're not supposed to do. But I just remember like coming to like the start line, and just like the energy and the people, like everyone like looks so different. But it was really the first time I just felt so like supported and embraced, and just, everyone is there, everyone's excited. And the one goal, to like finish the marathon and cross the finish line. And I just remember, the 26 miles, like down Lake Superior, and it just was so incredible. I just felt so like hyped up, and I knew once I crossed the finish line, like I was going to take up marathons. I knew once basketball was done with, that I was going to, run marathons. I was like such a new runner. And so I just was so excited and eager. I had so much to learn. I love just, reading like, how do you train for a marathon? Like, what's proper fueling and kind of all that good stuff. But yeah, I knew it was going to be marathons. But yeah, I jumped in from college basketball to a marathon. Kind of same thing with 100 after, I did like a lot of marathons when the pandemic hit and then canceled Boston. I knew like 100 miler was next for me. So I kind of just jumped in with big, doing everything big instead of kind of building up to it.
Yeah, and I appreciate that that's what you did, because I'm someone that tends to be such an overthinker with things like that. Like I'll be like, "Oh, that sounds really fun." And then I start thinking of the logistics of training and the logistics of terrain. I mean, I will go down a rabbit hole myself and I'll be like, "You know what? We're good. Like we're not going to do that," because it's not only is the distance daunting, but everything that I mean, for me personally, a marathon training requires a lot of me and it requires quite a bit of sacrifice. And there's always that that element of, I guess for me it's the mental. I mean, for me it's totally the mental. Like I get to a start line and I know I'm going to finish. I just have no clue what mental demons are going to pop up in the middle of that. And I'm like, 26.2 miles is a long time to fight mental demons. 100 miles, I don't know. And I just don't know. But you recently had a post about your 24-hour race, and I think it was that post. If not, I don't know. It was one of your recent posts. But I wrote this down because it felt it felt not empowering. Yes, empowering is part of it, but for me, it was so like a rock being thrown to the bottom of the water where it just landed, and I'm like, oh snap, like yeah. But you wrote something to the effect of remember your why and do it for yourself. And for me, I always talk about remembering your why, like why are you doing things? But what really landed was the and do it for yourself. So, how did you develop that?
Yeah, I think running when it just became like this incredible outlet for me and something I love to do. Like I was never worried about like what anyone else is doing or trying to beat so and so. For me, when I pick a race I'm going to do, I pick it for myself because I want to do it. And when I set a time goal or when it comes to 100 milers, like, maybe a mileage goal or whatever it is, it's a goal that like means the most to me because like you can't control what anyone else is doing. Maybe someone has like an incredible race, which is awesome, but it doesn't take away from like your accomplishment. And so, yeah, just like doing it for yourself. I feel like, especially now, like social media is super great, but I feel like it also can give us like a false like perception on like a lot of things. And, not, doing a race because you're like, oh, I want, people to congratulate me, which of course, feels good, but it's like, no, like no one can take away like your own accomplishment of like crossing that finish line. And when it gets hard, you're out there by yourself. Like you have no one else really to rely on. Like, yeah, like crowds and other people's can kind of help give you a little boost, but like the main person is you. So remembering your why and doing it for yourself. And like when you have to like overcome that hard time during that race, or like when you're in like deep in the pain cave, like you have to have like a goal and something that means so much to you. And I think like that's like what really helps me to keep going. It definitely was during that 24-hour race, just because it was, overnight, it was dark, we had thunderstorms, it was freezing, and just like everything that like made the race challenging was. And I was just, out in like the middle of the woods, basically like by myself. I hadn't seen a headlamp for like a really long time. And
Mm.
like when I got to that like really tough moment, I had to, really dig in and just remember like no, do it for myself. Like I'm the one who's going to feel proud of myself. I'm also the one that like has to get to the aid station. Like no one's going to come find me out here. And so I just think, yeah, like yeah, I just kind of learned like through running, just because it is like such a self, like I mean it's like an individual sport, like you're the one that has to do everything. So I think like that really, yeah, has just like taught me so much.
I love that because that's what I try to tell people, right? That there's such a huge mental side. So even when you're in a race surrounded by thousands of people, it's still you and you, right? And hopefully it's you and you having a party, but sometimes it's you against you, that you that wants to keep going and the you that wants to stop, right? Or the you who feels overwhelmed and doesn't even know how they can keep going. So I really appreciate that because it is on you, right? Like even hearing you, I immediately thought when you're like in the middle of this race, I was by myself, didn't see another headlamp. I'm like, you really have no choice but to keep moving forward until you get somewhere. And then by the time you get to that somewhere, hopefully you've overcome whatever, whatever it is, and you continue to move forward. You're like, okay, I made it here. I can keep on going. So I want to pull us back because you had mentioned alopecia. And can you tell us about that? I know that I feel like it entered the mainstream after the Oscars. Like, I didn't know what it was until the Oscars and Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith. So can you, with immense amount of gratitude from me and everyone who listens, can you just educate us a little bit on what that is?
Yeah, so alopecia is an autoimmune hair loss condition. It can happen to anyone at any age. So I lost my hair when I was 2 years old, but it can happen teenage, adult years, senior years, and it can, yeah. And so there's two kinds. There's universalis, which is the kind that I have. So that's total body hair. So I don't have any arm hair, leg hair, anything like that. Areata is the other kind. And that's where your hair could be kind of patchy. You might get a few bald spots. You might completely lose it all. And then it might grow back and you might keep your hair for, the rest of your life. It might fall out again. It might really thin out. It's just so unpredictable. And I think that is the harder kind to have just because there's such an unknown with it. Whereas like for me, I lost it at 2 and like my hair is never coming back. Definitely took me a really long time to kind of face that reality of that. But yeah, so those are the two main cons of alopecia. And I think, like, yes, it is hair, but it is so much more than just your hair. Like, you don't, and there's nothing wrong with this, but you don't realize like how attached you are to your hair until you completely lose it. And then, it's your eyebrows and your eyelashes, and you just, it's not like a vain thing. Cause I'm sure if I had hair, I would probably love my hair, and I probably would be very attached to it. And I think just, being empathetic towards someone, who has alopecia, because again, such an emotional toll it takes on you. Every day you walk out and like you look different. Or, I wore a wig for a really long time, but just like the work it took to, upkeep your wig, make sure that it kind of looks right, to, be putting on eyebrows and eyelashes and just doing makeup every day. And some people are super into that. And like there is nothing wrong with that because again, like I wore a wig for a good 20 years, just because I really struggled with my alopecia. But I think, yeah, just being empathetic towards someone who doesn't have hair because it is an emotional thing. Yeah, and there's nothing you can really do about it. There's no cure. There are treatments that people have tried. Again, everyone's situation is different. So it might stimulate hair growth for someone, but not for someone else, which again makes it hard because it's not, one size fits all. But yeah, so that's kind of alopecia.
Is that genetic?
It can be. There are, people who, I mean, because it is autoimmune. So like you might have someone else in your family who has like an autoimmune condition. Like for me personally, there is no one else in my family who has autoimmune anything. And so yeah.
This is a silly question, and I think I know the answer. But are there gender differences in terms of how people respond to people with alopecia? Is alopecia more common in females or men? I guess I'm trying to understand the socially how you have moved through life and how it potentially someone in a male body or man could have a different experience.
Um, yeah, okay, so there's definitely two things that come to mind with that right away. I feel like alopecia doesn't discriminate. So it can happen male, female. So not with that, but I will say, like, for me personally, my biggest fear and like struggle was, when I was a kid, not having hair, people would call me a boy and they would like reference that all the time. And that even to this day is like my biggest trigger. And it's something that makes me feel so self-conscious because I never wanted people to think I was a boy. And even into like my adult years now, it is something that people still say to me quite often. I get a lot of people like, oh, excuse me, sir, sir. And I just think because someone doesn't have hair, like that doesn't make them any less female. There definitely is a really big stigma around like women and hair and all of that. And our society really, as a whole hasn't accepted and embraced that, bald is the norm for some. And just because you don't have hair doesn't make you any like less female. But yeah, honestly, it's hard. I get a lot of comments, a lot of some really, really nice comments, people just being very supportive, but I do get a lot of just very ignorant and like outspoken, out of line comments as well. Just referencing me as like a male or, telling me that like I should, not shave my head because then I would be pretty or, kind of stuff like that. I do think that I do have a lot of male friends who have alopecia and their experiences are very different just because, you see a lot of guys who just shave their head. It's a lot more common as a male. Not that, they haven't ever been bullied or felt subconscious or anything like that. But I do think the females have a harder time just because of like the society and the standards and all of that. But yeah.
Yeah, and I think I have two daughters, and just hearing you speak, my oldest daughter, and I say the reason I'm bringing up the fact that I have two daughters is because our hair does make a statement, right? Like I think of, and that's why I'm bringing up my daughters. I'll get there eventually. I'm bringing up my daughters because my oldest has gorgeous hair. I mean, it looks like just like a silk sheet. She spends a lot of time preparing her hair, I mean, it's a ritual. It is a ritual of getting her hair ready for school with the blow dryer, the products that she puts in it. She gets complimented frequently on her hair. And there is a deep connection that she has to her hair. Like if you touch her head, she gets mad at you. And that's something that for me growing up, I didn't really have that connection. I was just like, oh, I live in Miami, Florida. It's humid. It's always frizzy. Like that's just kind of it. But seeing it through my daughters, I'm like, whoa, I didn't realize almost like, I don't want to say status, but it does say something. And it's really shocking, but it shouldn't be, right? How superficial we can be about that, right? And just whether you have hair or don't have hair, the texture of your hair, the length of your hair, all of that stuff. For me, I just get so amazed at how quickly people are to insert an opinion when they were never asked. They were never asked to contribute an opinion to begin with. So you had mentioned that those are still, if someone says something, the sir, that those are still triggers for you. So how do you work through or live with those triggers?
Yeah, I think, something why it is still like such a big trigger. I think for me, I just would never be mean to someone intentionally. I would never make comments about someone or, if I think something, I just like wouldn't say it. So I think it does always like take me by surprise, like I never expected. And so like when and I think like my nature isn't to like snap back at someone. And so when they say it, I'm like, it just like I don't know how to respond because again, like I'm not gonna make a mean comment back to you. And I just even as a kid, like I was so quiet as a kid. I was polite, I did good in school. Like I didn't do anything that would like make me like be bullied, but I was bullied so much. And so yeah, so that's hard. And I think running, that's why that has been so great for me. I love running like by myself. It's just such like a quiet, healthy outlet for me. And so yeah, I'll like go on a run and just like kind of process that. I love like journaling and writing. That really helps me a lot too, just to kind of like write out my feelings. And I think too, just, every morning I have a gratitude journal. And so I just like write things that I'm thankful for. And sometimes it is like something positive about myself that I like do really like. And I think like that really helps me to just kind of start off like, the day like on the right foot. And I think, when it does get hard and it does kind of take me back, I do like look at my 100-mile belt buckles, I look at awards I've won and just kind of things like that. I do have them, out in display just so, when I pass by them, I'm like, oh yeah, like, and then it just kind of reminds me like, oh, I have a lot to be like proud of. So I think just like focusing on like the positives and not letting it, take me down. I do have moments where it does happen and I will feel sad. And I think that's also important too, to feel your feelings. And there's nothing wrong with like when someone hurts something, you don't have to be strong all the time. I feel like it's actually healthier if you like need to cry, then cry. Like there's nothing wrong with that. And so like that helps me a lot too, because, I have my moment of sadness or, frustration or like whatever that is. And then I'm like, okay, like I got that on my system. And then now I'm gonna, go back to being positive and, working towards my goals and stuff like that. And I think also just like being honest about stuff too. I, have a pen pal program for, kids and teens like with alopecia. And yeah, just like being able to like be really honest and say like, yes, I'm, really grateful for my alopecia today, but like I still have moments where I'm like, wow, like this actually kind of sucks. Like this is like a hard thing to deal with. And I think like being honest with myself too, because like it's not always sunshine and rainbows, like you can be a very positive person and, be really grateful for your alopecia, but also with that, just being honest and saying like I'm having hard days and not putting like this unrealistic expectation on people that like you have to love your alopecia every single day or like I just feel like no one loves everything about themselves every single day. Alopecia or not, we all have days and seasons where we're like, oh, I don't, like this about myself right now. Like feel like that's just normal.
Yeah, and I think I just want to highlight like three things from what you said. One, interacting with other people can be really challenging, right? Like
Yeah.
it's just that. Like I just always marvel at the human species, honestly, of how capable we are of deeply hurting one another, and yet how much we need each other to feel loved and like we belong and all of that. So that's one thing that I want to highlight from what you said. The other thing I wanted to highlight is the idea of both and, right? Like you can be both grateful and have a pity party, right? Like both things can exist. And it's just highlighting your own humanity, your own experience of being someone in the world and being someone who is continually showing up fully as herself. And that doesn't mean, and I really, really appreciated what you said about not having to be strong all the time. Like it's okay. It's okay. It's okay to kind of let it all down and cry or, have the pity party. For me, I love pity parties. I think they're great. It's just making sure we don't stay too long in them. And then the last thing I wanted to highlight from what you said is that healing is not linear and you never completely heal from things. Like we're always in some kind of process of healing. And even to yourself saying, to me, it's so powerful for you to say, like, wait, I still get triggered, right? Like I still get triggered even after all this growth and knowing how strong I am and how incredible I am and how beautiful I am. I still get triggered because we never fully heal from things, right? We're constantly evolving and we're constantly changing, and our interactions with the world are changing. And I find that, I guess the question I want to ask is, because you share so much of yourself, when did you decide to do that, right? Because it's not everyone would be like, let me start an Instagram account and let me put myself on display, when I have firsthand experience with how hurtful and ignorant people can be.
Yeah, definitely like as a kid, even as like a teenager and young adult, I did not share. I did not share anything about my alopecia. People would ask me, if I was wearing a wig, and I would just lie to them and say like, no, this is my real hair, just because I was so like embarrassed and self-conscious and just yeah, feeling so like lonely and isolated and just all of the things like with my alopecia. So I did not share for a super, super long time. And that was like such a heavy burden to carry because I just had all of these like feelings and I didn't know like how to talk about it. I didn't know like, yes, I have like super great friends, but like as far as like someone who also had alopecia and who actually understood, I did not have that growing up. And so for me, that was like the hardest thing because people would always say, and I appreciate it, I understand like where they're coming from, but just saying like, oh, like I understand. And I'd be like, no, you don't understand, like you have hair. And so again, that also kind of led me to starting my pen pal program as well. But yeah, I would say, when I decided to kind of tell the world about my alopecia, I just did like a Facebook post. I had told some of my like super close friends and I talked about it with them. And that kind of was like my coming out moment, like with my alopecia. And I think because I was like behind a screen, so I didn't have to see people's like reaction. Because I mean, I trusted my super close friends, telling them in person, but there's a lot of people that are kind of wild cards, I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't know. So that to me, like doing it kind of behind a screen was better. And I think, is very eye-opening. So I mean, a lot of people were very nice and supportive, but there was a really good handful of people that, told me I was making the wrong decision as far as like not wearing my wig and were like not very supportive. And so I, unfriended and blocked and deleted kind of all of that like negativity. And I think kind of like that was a huge turning point for me as far as like, I had always dreamed of getting to this point where I was okay with my alopecia and I could embrace it and love it and like all of that. And I think in that moment, I could have went one or two ways. Like I could have put my wig back on and like hidden and, still, felt like I was carrying this huge like burden and secret and like never really being like my true self, or making the choice to say like, no, like this isn't me, like this hasn't been me, like I'm not going to hide anymore. And I think it definitely, like I knew which route I was going to go. And I think from that point I really just kind of stay focused like on myself and kind of put blinders on, in the sense of like the only people I want in my life are people that are supportive of it. And so people who weren't supportive, like yes, I had to like cut off people that I thought would have been super there and supportive, and that was hard. But I think only keeping people like in my inner circle who are so supportive and just, staying focused on me and like what makes me happy and feel the most confident. And for me, it was taking off my wig and kind of journeying into like that like next chapter. And I think that's when my running like really you got like super serious, and just like the empowerment I felt from running and just like how like beautiful and strong I felt when I was running. I think that's something that I really kind of put everything into, was like just that, because that's something like I had control over. The more I was running, the more confident I started to feel in myself. And kind of from then, I was like, I'm going to share because I know what a world of difference it would have made to me to, know, or not even like know someone, but just like to see someone, with alopecia out living their life, to be able to read about, like their daily struggles, but then like really positive things about that. And I think that's kind of, yeah, how I decided. And I just have learned that, there's nothing wrong with like blocking people, and I'm not mean for doing that. I definitely for a while was like, oh, is that mean of me? Again, just because like my nature is like to always like be nice and to give people grace, but like not everyone deserves like second chances, especially like when they're not willing to, see what they did wrong and apologize and stuff like
Mm.
that. And I think just like also, kind of taking ownership of my responsibility. Like I'm not going to make anyone else, like no one's going to make me feel bad about myself when I know like what I bring to the table. I know, that I'm a good person and like all of that, and just like the person that I want to be, and just knowing the amount of people that I have that like look up to me, whether it's from alopecia and running or just like, in the community. I just like take that like so seriously and take that to heart. And I think just that's what really inspires me and motivates me to like keep going. Or when I have like hard days, being like, no, like there's people watching you, like people want to see me succeed and they want to see me do well. But there's also people that, are cheering against me and like don't want to see me succeed. So I think like it's kind of like twofold with that. But yeah.
Yeah, it's you control who has access to your piece, right? Like that's a big, big one. And I think it's hard to cut people off, right? It's hard to be like, you know what? We're good. Like, we're good. You go do you, and I'm going to go do me. But sometimes it's what's necessary, especially when you yourself are evolving, right? Like you are in transformation. So I'm curious because I'm trying to create a timeline in my head of at 2 years old, that's when you were diagnosed with alopecia, right?
Mhm.
and then you wore a wig for 20 years. So when you first started running, you were wearing a wig?
Yep, yep.
Okay. Okay. So you first started running, you were wearing a wig, and then I guess I'm trying to see where there's parallels between your, I guess, your development as a runner, for a lack of a better word. I guess I don't want to use the word journey, but your journey as a runner, and then this journey of coming out, right? To kind of like, to, I guess, to use your words of like coming out and being like, this is who I am and this is how
Mhm.
I want to show up. Are there parallels in those journeys? Are there things that you're like, oh yeah, I remember when I ran the, 2020 race and blah, 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 and the next day I did that. Is there anything like that for you?
Yes, yep. So yeah, I kinda, because I went right from college basketball to running marathons, and so, like, I still very much was, like, struggling with alopecia and, like, hiding that, so I used, like, double-sided tape just like I did, with college basketball, and wore, like, a thick headband for several marathons. I still was wearing my wig. There was also kind of the time where, I was, like, out of college, and I started, to come to this, like, reality that I never wanted to face, that, like, my hair is never coming back, like, and I need, instead of letting my alopecia control me and, being like fearful of, people not liking me and kind of all of this stuff, I was like, no, like I need to take control of this, because like I've spent enough time like trying to hide this. It was very stressful. I went through like a lot of extremes just to kind of like do all of that. And so yeah, I was training for the Rock and Roll San Diego Marathon, and that was my first bald marathon. This definitely again was a long time coming. But when I was kind of going through this like transition of like wanting to be okay with my alopecia, that was, the same season where I started to tell, my close friends about my alopecia. And so I'd be like, okay, like tell this person about it, tell this person about it. And I had like such a great group of like friends and like support system. And then, kind of with like running, like, little smaller goals, I would, tell myself, okay, go to the grocery store without your wig on. I still, wore a hat, but just that was like such a huge step for me. Again, this wasn't like overnight. This was like several months kind of like building up to all of this, but I just like kept like doing stuff like that. And it was very, very scary. It was overwhelming and emotional and just all of that. But it also was like kind of like exciting. And I knew like this is what I had to do. And so it was actually on like my 20-mile training run before Rock and Roll San Diego that I took my wig off and in the middle of my run, and I still run past the spot on the Greenway all the time. I think, everything was like kind of like building up to this moment, just, all of those months of, taking those little, baby steps, doing that, having a little more confidence in myself. I ran, several marathons and just, having confidence with that as well. It was very dark in the morning. There was no one else around me, but even just doing that like in public was like just so freeing. And I remember, holding my wig in my hand, and it was all balled up and it smelled terrible and it just was all knotty and just, but for the longest time, like when I wore my wig, I just thought it was like the most beautiful thing. I was like, I have this red, like long, beautiful hair. I was born with red hair. And so for me, like I always felt like my wig was so beautiful, but this was the first moment where I was like, there's nothing beautiful about this. Like just how it was balled up and the smell and just kind of all of that. And I just remember I just kind of held it in my hand and then I like ran home. I hung it up in my shower. It really was like the first time of just, again, I can remember this moment so much, just like looking in my mirror, touching my face and then, really looking at like my facial features and just everything. Because for the longest time, I hated looking at myself in the mirror. Like I would, brush my teeth and I'd be like, looking at in the other direction just so I wouldn't like look at myself. I never would, like take my wig off like in front of the mirror, just because like then I was forced to look at myself and I just like hated that. But it really was like, the time I was like, wow, like, I like my facial features, like I like my eyes and just kind of things like that, that I never really took the time to notice and appreciate about myself. And so I went on and ran Rock and Roll San Diego. I did not bring my wig with me. I think I would have been tempted to wear it. And I think also I loved that it was across the country because I wasn't going to run into anyone. I think, had it been here in Charlotte, I don't think I would have been brave enough to run that because, I would have, known a bunch of people. And so I liked that. It was my first, yeah, marathon without my wig. And it was just so empowering and it was awesome. And I just remember crossing the finish line and I just knew like I was going to be okay. It was the first time where I felt something positive about my alopecia because for the longest time, like I saw nothing positive about it. I never really had like a positive experience with it. And this was like the first moment where I was like, I'm going to be okay. Like, this is going to be really hard. And this is going to be like a huge adjustment and it's going to be emotional. And I like knew all of that. But I also knew like I was going to be okay, at the same time. And so, yeah, and kind of like after that, that's kind of then I did like the big Facebook post and kind of stuff like that. But yeah, that's kind of how yeah, stopped wearing my wig.
That's such a beautiful story because you saw yourself for the first time, right? Like you really saw yourself. And I think of how many of us are moving through life afraid to see ourselves, right? Like in general, just afraid to see ourselves or afraid to be who we are. And I also really appreciate that you went across the country because it's so true. You're like, no one knows me anyway, right? Like
Yeah.
there's no expectation of you being Lindsay with the red hair, right? Like there's none of that. You go to Expo, you get your bib and you're just the name and the number, right? Like there's none of that. And I think that's something that's talk about, I don't know if you planned that. Like, was that something that you were like, you know what? Let's pick this race to have that be that experience, or was it just all these serendipitous life events coming together at the right time?
Yeah, kind of all of it was coming together. I had always loved just, running and traveling. I loved always the feeling of just being in a different city just because like no one knew me. And even though like up until that point I had always worn my wig for races, I still liked that, no one was going to be like kind of like looking at me, like making comments and stuff like that. So yeah, if it would have been San Diego, it would have been a different race, like not in Charlotte, just because that was kind of my thing, just to kind of travel and go somewhere. And just, yeah, I don't want to say I was like running from my alopecia, but kind of, yeah.
Yeah, it's more the way I'm receiving it is that needing to silence the voices so that you can be who you are, right?
Mhm.
Needing to silence the opinion, the expectations from others so that you can experience what it is to be you and to really appreciate yourself, which I think is so incredible because it takes bravery and it just takes bravery to be yourself and to own who you are without apologizing or without making excuses for it. It's really really hard. There's a lot. I say it all the time, like there's a lot in the world, and there are a lot of places and spaces that require us to be a certain way and to act a certain way and to speak a certain way and dress a certain way, that if we can reclaim spaces where we don't have to be any of that, then we should. So you have this race, you have this Facebook post, you share more about your running. At what point did Lindsay's little pen pals come up?
Um, yeah, so I am like super old school. I've always loved like writing letters and getting mail and all that kind of stuff. And so it formally became a thing about 4 years ago. Kind of in between then, I had, meeting, kids with alopecia, or they had like, reached out to me, or the parents had. And I had like written letters and kind of connected with them. And I would, just really had this thought of like, how incredible would this be to like make it like official and like really like pour into this. I thought like there's just like such a need for that. And I also was like, wow, like, again, when I was a kid, if I would have gotten to write a letter to someone who had alopecia, like that would have been just so encouraging and like so inspiring to me. And also from like the other end to be like, no, like I understand what that's like. I've walked that life for basically my whole life. So being able to really like to relate to things and say like I understand the struggle with that, Or when people are like, oh, I want to like maybe look at buying a wig, like what was that process like? Or like, how do you deal with bullies? Like, how do you feel confident in yourself? How do you play sports? And I just have all of these experiences because, I've like lived it. And so that was like kind of the thing. I just kind of put together like a flyer and was like, hey, this is what it is. And then, social media just, does its thing again. This is like such a great thing about social media, is that it's really easy to kind of share stuff. And so people were just like sharing it. And then yeah, it just grew so much and it's been just incredible. It's never been about trying to have like as many pen pals, but just, like quality over quantity, and just like the connections that I've gotten to make, to have pen pals all over the country has been just so awesome. Getting to be like that mentor and help really in any way that I can. But yeah, it's just been really, really great.
Yeah, well, I love letters too, but I love mail. I love mail. And as a
Yeah.
kid, I just remember always being so excited about mail. And I remember like when my daughters were younger, it was the same thing. They would fight over who would check the mail. And it's really exciting to kind of check the mail. So how does the Pen Pal program work? Can you talk to us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so my contact information is listed on the flyer. There's a Facebook page and an Instagram page. I'm really easy to get in contact with. And so either emails or messages, usually like the parent, if the child is younger, will reach out and be like, hey, my son and daughter would love to be like connected with it. And so they'll send like their address and information, a little bit about the child, just so I kind of know how to kind of start it. And then I'll send them a letter. I send them a picture of myself and I sign it and just, kind of write a little bit and just kind of let like the conversation flow naturally. I do 4 big mailings throughout the year, but then as letters come in, I respond back like right away. And yeah, it's just been like really awesome. Again, sometimes we're talking about like super deep things about alopecia. Sometimes it's not. It's kids, teens, adults. And it's just grown so much. And then now it's also kind of transitioning into like Zoom calls and just like calls and just kind of again, like however I can like help. I am the only person who is writing the letters. And I appreciate everyone who just like wants to help and offers to help. There's people that have donated like gift cards, and stationery and just kind of stuff like that. Just because I do like fund everything myself and I'm so happy to do it. And I just, appreciate how much people want to help. But just because there's such personal information shared, I am the only person like writing letters. If there is someone who, wants to be like connected with like another kid, I will email parents and just say like, hey, would it be okay if, I sent your email address to this parent? You guys are kind of in the same area. So I do try to like connect people that way as well, just because, like maybe like a 7-year-old boy like doesn't really want to talk to me. And I understand that. I don't take that personally. So if I can help in like that kind of realm, I just have like a huge spreadsheet that has, ages and cities, just so I kind of know like where everything is. And so if I can connect people that way, I definitely do that as well, just because it's not really like about me, but just like about helping them and connecting them. But yeah.
It's so interesting to hear everything that you've shared so far, right? Because you went from your own difficulty with accepting it, with accepting that your hair was never going to come back, to being empowered by it, and now to mentoring others. And I don't want to say normalizing it, because I feel like it's so silly that we even have to normalize just being who you are, right? Like, and yet now you're giving back to others. And I always ask this question, I feel like almost every single conversation, but simply because there are obviously other people with alopecia like yourself. And yet, is there anyone else putting themselves out there in the same way that you are? And if so, yay. But if not, I guess it's more of that, what's your why for that?
Yeah, I think I think I'm just like such a natural like born leader and like take charge person. And I think like if I want something done, I'm like, all right, like let's do it. I'll be the one to do it. And so I think, I also, just had this like calling on my heart to like start this like program. And so I'm like, I'm just gonna do it. And I think again, like there is no failure with it. I think in anything, the only way you can ever fail is if you just don't try. And so, yeah, I just, had this idea and just kind of pursued it and just kind of rolled with it. I think, again, just knowing like what a difference it would have made for me as a kid, it is just like, honestly, like there is no like finish line or race medal that can really compare to just, being that person that I needed when I was younger. And like, I love getting letters too. And just how many times people tell me that, like, I'm inspiring or I'm helping them or that like I'm the best pen pal in the world. Like, that just means like so much to me. And so knowing that I am making like such a positive impact, it just kind of makes like all of it worth it. And I think like, yeah, like why not if you have an idea about something? And also like if you can help someone, like you should always do it. I just think, life is short. You have no idea what's going to happen. So if you have an opportunity to help someone and just, be like a positive light, to just do it. You don't, and also too, like you don't ever really know like what someone is like really going through. So yeah, I just kind of thought, why not?
Yeah, I appreciate that because oftentimes I know for myself, I get stuck and I'll go down the rabbit hole of like, is someone else doing this? Why isn't someone else doing it? And then again, kind of like circling back to what I said at the beginning, like the overthinking really like that I am so impressed by my mind sometimes where I'm like, perhaps if you stopped thinking about it and you just did it, you'd feel a lot better than the thinking aspect of it. So I really appreciate that of even just asking yourself, okay, if I have this idea, then why not? Why not me? Why not try it? Because to what you said, the failure is such a relative thing, right? Like failure is so relative, but even in the failure, there's a lesson to learn, right? Like there's some kind of lesson that you can get from it. So I really appreciate that because I just find that there's levels to what you are showing people by existing, right? By existing in a way where you're like, here's my post, here I ran, here's this, here are my pen pals, like here I am. And I guess as you start to look forward, what do you envision for yourself and running and for pen pals and for just a little bit more broader, like women in sport? What are some of the things that you envision for the future?
Yeah, I think just to continue to like grow the pen pal program, and just like help as many people as I can. I think that would be like super incredible. And to just like make a positive difference. I think every opportunity I've had to share my story, to educate on alopecia is such an incredible opportunity that I am so grateful for. Because again, like I just think like, wow, it's like such a responsibility and an honor to get to do that and to get to represent so much, especially for, people who don't have or haven't found their voice quite yet in that or don't really know like how to share or talk about it, but to, to see like my story out there. Hopefully that's providing like hope and inspiration for others. So I think just to continue to say yes to opportunities that are right for me and align with like everything. So yeah, just continue to grow that. And I think just when it comes to running, just can continue to just do it because I love it, and just like stay focused on that, not to ever get caught up in like the hype of just trying to be like someone that I'm not or represent something that isn't true to who I am. I've stayed very true to myself and have said no to a lot of things that just didn't really align with like my morals and values or like who I am. And so just to continue to stay true to that, I think like that's something that like really like makes me feel good about myself, is just knowing that, I haven't tried to change to kind of turn into someone that I'm not. And I think just continue to trace down goals and like challenge myself. I think I'm really looking forward to 6 days in the dome again and to just building off what I did last year. To continue to run marathons and just set goals for myself that mean a lot, and just to continue to improve and just to do it because I love it, never taking it for granted because I know what a gift it is to get to run, to be healthy, to get to the start line healthy, and all of that stuff. And I just think, yeah, it's like such a gift. And I guess when it comes to like women in sports, I feel like they're definitely kind of like having their moment right now. I think, women's college basketball, again, just being a basketball player myself, I just think like that's so awesome. And I just hope, they sports, especially for women, just continue to grow and to be watched and to be, like respected and shown and like all of that stuff because women work just as hard as men. Women are just as great as athletes of men. And I think, yeah, just giving women the respect and recognition that they deserve as well. But yeah, just continue to kind of move the bar forward and yeah, to just keep working hard.
I love all of that because I mean, this podcast is all about women, right? Like there's only ever been female guests, and I don't plan on changing that anytime soon because we are doing incredible things, right? And we are doing incredible things when sometimes we live in a society that says we shouldn't be doing them, right? Like we are chasing these goals. And even for myself in the stage of life that I'm in, where the balancing my running goals with being a quote unquote good mother is something that still comes up. And it's like I often think about it. I'm like, if my husband wanted to do that, like no one would bat an eye. And yet if it's me, there's I have to think about things differently, or the expectation is different. And now thankfully it's easier because my children are older. But I know when they were younger, it was very much so I felt like I was going against the grain, chasing some of my goals because those goals meant I was away from the home, away from the children and all of that. So I really appreciate that. And I find that that's something that social media, I'm so grateful for, because we do have more access to different athletes and to their training and to them like just speaking up. W- you what was it a couple of years ago? I think was it basketball where the female college teams showed their gym compared to the men's gym? Do you remember that? Do you remember the
Yeah,
story?
so it was yeah, during COVID when they were in the bubble and it was like the weight room of like the women's team versus the men's team and just like how different it was. Like the women I mean like the men's had like every machine possible, like multiple sets of like dumbbells and like all the weights and the women had just like a few benches and like a few just like little weights and it was just so different just like their like weight just like their like weight rooms.
Yeah, I remember seeing that and truly thinking, I'm so glad social media exists for this because they
Mhm.
were posting videos and pictures of this is what our room looks like and this is what their room looks like. And there were several players that were like, I like this, I'm not going to do anything with this. Like I probably bench more than some of the guys. And it
Yeah.
was so like, it was so enlightening. So that's one reason why I'm thankful for social media because it definitely grants us access to things that we did not have before. And it also just makes us aware of things that quite possibly we weren't aware of. I know for myself growing up, I didn't even know women played basketball, right? I had no clue. I mean, I think it was when I went to college that there was a female basketball team, but growing up, I just never saw that, never saw it on TV, none of that. So it is really interesting to see how that is all evolving. I'm going to go back real quick. Can you tell us what 6 days in the dome is?
Yeah, so it's in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, actually pretty close to where I grew up. So you have 6 days or 144 hours to kind of run as much as you can. And every 6 hours you change directions on the indoor track. They have a sleep room upstairs. And it's just, yeah, however your strategy is, you can take sleep breaks. They have hot meals, tons of food, just everything. I think the thing that makes it extra challenging is that so it's an indoor like ice skating and hockey rink. So it is cold in there. And then you have the track, but just like how it is, because there's like ice underneath it. It's not like your usual kind of like rubbery kind of track. And so that makes it harder as well, just because of how hard it is, and then like the cold temperatures. And just, yeah, like the strategy behind that as far as like how you do your sleep breaks, obviously making sure you're eating a ton of food, taking calories and all of that. But yeah, you have 6 days to run as many miles as you can. They also have 72 hours, so 3 day, 48, 24, 12. There's only a few 6 day races in the entire world. So there is a lot of international runners as well, which is pretty incredible. And yeah, you just have 6 days to kind of do what you can.
And you did this race last year?
Yes, last June was my first time at 6 days.
Okay, so this year going into it, you're taking
Mhm,
whatever lessons you learned from last year.
mhm.
And so I don't want you to tell us what you're going to do because I want you to keep that to yourself. But for those of us that are like, I want to do something like that, how would you convince us that, like, go for it? Yes, it's a good idea. Do it.
Mhm. For sure. I think if you have like the excitement and eager and willingness to work hard and just know like you're going to go through a lot of highs and lows, but to just do it. Like don't overthink it and just do it and sign up. And I think like once you're signed up, you're like, all right, I'm committed to it. I would not recommend just jumping into a 6 day race though. I would say definitely do a 100 miler, do a 24-hour, 48-hour race before, just because ultras are so different than marathons or, kind of shorter distances with just like how you're pacing yourself. You do walk during that. You have to be eating a ton. So I don't think jumping right into a 6 day, but definitely doing like a long ultra beforehand just to kind of get used to like the kind of foods you would eat and all that kind of stuff. But I think if it's something that's exciting to you and you want to try it, like absolutely go for it. Again, like tomorrow isn't promised and seize the day, make the most out of it. Try it. Again, I think the only way you fail is if you don't try or, being too scared to try because you never know what's going to happen. I think signing up again, I had never ran 6 days before, but I just like signed up. I was like, I'm going all in. And I think just like doing it, committing to it, training and working hard. And then when I got there, I like just knew there was no way I could fail because I knew I trained and worked as hard as I possibly could. And so that gave me such confidence and peace. And when I got there, I was like, this is going to be hard. I'm going to learn a lot. Like, this is my first go around at it. But I knew like if I just kept going and kept trying and kept working hard, it kept moving forward, that like I couldn't fail. And I think that also was like such a gratifying feeling. But yeah, just go for it.
Go for it. That's all I'm going to say. Go for it. Okay. So you got 6 days in the dome. That's in June.
Mhm.
What else do you
Yep.
have coming up that we can celebrate you in?
I mean, honestly, that is like my really main focus right now, to be honest. I definitely will do probably like a 48-hour race as a tune-up race. Then maybe like another 24-hour race here, kind of between now and June 17th. But honestly, that really just is kind of, I'm going to do the Chicago Marathon in the fall. I'm excited to kind of jump back into a marathon. But for right now, the forefront is 6 days.
Okay. Where can we find you? Where can we go to learn more about you?
Yeah, so social media, Instagram, Lindsay Hannah 3. Yeah, I would say that's pretty much it. Yeah, I just have again had the opportunity to really just share my story on a lot of platforms. If you Google my name, a lot of stuff will come up. So if you want to learn more about alopecia and running and just kind of all that kind of stuff, yeah, you can also do that.
Okay, final question is what final words do you have for us?
Ooh, I just think I guess maybe a couple things. If you have like a dream or a goal, like go for it. Don't let anyone tell you that like your dream is too big or that you're not good enough or you're not strong enough. Just go for it, believe in yourself and work hard. And also like choose kind and choose empathy. I think in a world that can be just super kind of ugly and just kind of awful at times, you will always feel better about yourself if you take the high road, if you choose kindness, and if you have an opportunity to help someone, or you see something, someone struggled with whatever, someone had a bad day or dealt with a bully, taking that 30 seconds to type, like a nice little comment. I feel like that makes such like a world of difference that, and when someone is on the receiving end of that, they're like, wow, like this stranger or like this person, took time out of their day to kind of build me up. And I just think like what an incredible thing that is. So if you have the and like yeah, obviously like keep it like very genuine and authentic and all of that. But yeah, if you have an opportunity to help someone or just kind of be the light and a positivity, go for it.
Yeah. Lindsay, thank you so much for joining me. Good luck
Of course.
on
Thank you.
your 6 days in the dome. I honestly, I came into this conversation a little bit worried that you would inspire me to do something large like that. Not like that, not 6 days, because that's no. But I had a feeling I was like, I'm probably going to talk to her and feel so inspired to just push the edges of where I am with running. So thank you for just being you and for, I feel like, reminding us all that we can do hard things and we can do those hard things regardless of how we look, because how we look, everyone's welcome. And hopefully we can all take your words of being kind and just choosing kind every opportunity we get. So Lindsay, thank you so, so much for
Of
joining me.
course.
Everyone, we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.